Hello, friends. Welcome to Winter at St. Andrew. It is my privilege to welcome you here today from the beautiful St. Andrew Sanctuary. I am grateful, as always, to share this sacred online space with you, where we are all invited, included, and valued as vital and beloved members of our broader worshiping community. With its long nights and quiet days, winter invites us into new rhythms and routines that make possible the rest, renewal, and rootedness our bodies and souls long for. What appears to be a season of dormancy is a time of stillness and hidden growth, essential to all of life. At St. Andrew, we offer an abundance of opportunities throughout this season for self-care, spiritual growth, finding community, and serving others. You can visit gostandrew.com/winter for more information. We are proud to be an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes all people into the full life and communion of our church. This includes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome at St. Andrew and you belong here. If you have any questions about our church, prayer requests for our care team, or if you would like to get in touch with a member of our pastoral team or staff, please email info@gostandrew.com. If you would like to explore deeper engagement with the St. Andrew community through our many classes, group life gatherings, and service opportunities, you can email us directly at connect@gostandrew.com. We'd love to hear from you. Just as a reminder, our full Sunday morning worship services, complete with music, prayer, announcements, liturgy, ministry spotlights, and the sermon, are live streamed on our YouTube page each week and permanently archived for viewing anytime. Lastly, to contribute a financial gift to the work and ministry of St. Andrew, you can always visit gostandrew.com/give or text St. Andrew to 28950. And now let's listen together to this week's scripture and sermon.
Psalm 85, verses 10 through 13. Faithful love and truth have met. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Truth springs up from the ground. Righteousness gazes down from heaven. Yes, the Lord gives what is good, and our land yields its produce. Righteousness walks before God, making a road for his steps. Acts chapter 10, verses 34 through 36. Peter said, I really am learning that God doesn't show partiality to one group of people over another. Rather, in every nation, whoever worships him and does what is right is acceptable to him. This is the message of peace he sent to the Israelites by proclaiming the good news through Jesus Christ. He is Lord of all.
Do you remember that popular series of animated educational short films called Schoolhouse Rock? If you grew up in the 70s or 80s like me, you probably couldn't wait for Saturday morning to come around when you could roll out of bed, perch yourself in front of the TV with a generous bowl of Captain Crunch, and learn all about grammar and science, civics, history, and economics through all those catchy, colorful cartoon videos set to snazzy, jazzy rock tunes. Schoolhouse Rock was ingenious. Where would Gen X be today without those memorable hits like I'm Just a Bill, or 3 is a Magic Number, Multiplication, and one of my personal favorites, interjections with that laughable line, yow, that's not fair, giving a guy a shot down there. I mean, how else would we have possibly known that yow is an actual interjection? But who could ever forget Schoolhouse Rock's most popular song, Conjunction, Junction? Do you remember the chorus? Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Hooking up words and phrases and clauses. I got 3 favorite cars that get most of my job done, said the conductor. I got and, but, and or. They'll get you pretty far. Months ago, for reasons I can't explain, I found myself randomly singing Conjunction, Junction when I had this sudden revelation. Maybe the source of so many of our problems in the modern world is that we've forgotten how to live and think and act with a conjunction, junction mindset. Conjunctions, as you know, are connectors that bring together two or more words, clauses, or phrases. Conjunctions make it possible for us to say things like, I was raised Catholic, but now I'm a Methodist. Or, I can get out of bed and go to church today, or I can choose to sleep in. Or, I can't wait until the sermon is over because there are always donuts after church. We use conjunctions to describe everyday experiences, feelings, motivations, and choices, but we're often unaware of the power of a well-placed conjunction to make meaning of our lives. The power to shape how we see and interact with others, the power to create the kind of world we want to live in. Conjunctions can often be the weightiest words we'll ever use. They have the power to connect or divide, to include or exclude, to expand or diminish our perspectives, our relationships, our possibilities. A well-placed conjunction can change everything. You might say to someone, I thought a lot about what I did, and I need to ask you for forgiveness. And maybe that person says to you, what you did was wrong, but I still love you. And maybe you say, whether or not I can ever make it up to you, I promise to do better. And maybe that person says, because neither of us is perfect, nor love ever easy, I forgive you. Some conjunctions, spoken in the right moment, possess an extraordinary power to keep us honest and real and open. They can keep us from closing down, closing off the other, closing in on ourselves or our opinions, our feelings. They can create or expand new possibilities and realities for us. Conjunctions, in other words, add nuance to our real lived experience. They honor the complexity inherent in all life. They help make meaning and point to ultimate concerns. And they can be so transformative in a world that's always trying to reduce and condense every aspect of our lives into all or nothing, take it or leave it, black and white, clear-cut boundaries or binaries, like good, bad, right, wrong, right, left, conservative, progressive, Democrat, Republican, heaven, earth, heaven, hell, body, soul, spirit, flesh, Coke, Pepsi, Mac, PC, Ford, Chevy. You get the point. Does it ever feel sometimes like you're living in a world in which everything has to always be either this or that, where there's no space for a nuanced or courageous and? Imagine meeting someone who says, I actually really love the Broncos and the Chiefs. And you'd say, no way, choose a side, you bandwagon opportunist. Can you imagine someone who is comfortable navigating both sides of the political aisle, depending on the particular issue? And so they say, I think of myself as a congressive pro-conservative. You'd say, not possible. Pick a team, flip-flopper. Or someone who grew up Roman Catholic but now attends a United Methodist church, and so they say, I think I'm a United Cathodist or a Roman Metholic. You'd say, wait, what? Is that even possible? But in God's calculus, not only is it possible, it's how our world is supposed to work. Our modern worldview tries to split reality into all these little individual distinctive parts so that we can manage them. Because the world is so big and because it's impossible to understand the totality of it, let alone manage or control it, we try to separate the individual parts of reality from the whole of reality. We break down our world as much as we can into understandable, manageable parts. This is why, for example, humans created religions, and then created denominations, and then branches, and then sects within those religions. It's why humans created a social category called race, and then assigned people into racial classes based on skin color, and then conveniently assigned unequal values to those classes in order to subjugate and enslave certain peoples. It's why humans invented the whole concept of nation states and borders and armies to defend those nations, and assigned nationalities to define who could enter those borders and who could not. It all seems so convenient and manageable to split the whole of our world, the totality of our reality, into individual parts. It's our way of eliminating uncertainty and mastering our world. But it creates other problems. Isn't it ironic that we spend so much of our time dividing up our world the way we do, and then we spend the rest of our time complaining about how divided our world is today? That's one problem with splitting the whole into parts. But another problem is that it creates a lot of subtle and sometimes glaring contradictions and paradoxes for us when we then try to understand our world. When we split our whole into smaller parts, we can no longer see the totality of all things. Our perspective gets super limited, and this prevents daily paradoxes for us. We know, for example, that it's just not possible to really, truly define what, say, an American is or a Ukrainian is based solely on where she was born or what language he speaks. We know it's more complex than that. We know we can't even remotely describe what, say, a black person is or a white person is or a brown person is or what truly matters to any of them or how any of them think based solely on their skin color. It's so much more complex than that. Thanks to so much religious hypocrisy, we know we can't come close to understanding what a Christian really is, based simply on what she professes to believe or by what he does when he assumes no one's watching. I needed a plumber. A friend recommended a plumber to me. She said, "He's great. He's a Christian plumber." And I thought, what does that even mean? Does he sing praise songs while he's snaking my toilet? It's like that scene in Good Will Hunting when Sean, the therapist, meets up with Will, who grew up an orphan. And Sean says, "You think I know the first thing about how hard your life has been, who you are, because I read Oliver Twist? Does that encapsulate you?" You see, we humans, these unique lives we have, this crazy world we live in, this present unfolding, evolving reality that surrounds all of us, it's all so much more complex than any of our social binaries can capture. Our language, our categories like religion, race, politics, nationality, sexual orientation, they're really all incapable of encapsulating the totality of us or the other or the whole world. Why? Well, it's because while this world is not completely whole, every single thing in the world is part of the whole. While reality is not totally one, reality is more than just a bunch of individual parts. Do you see the paradox here? This is why we need to put an "and" between the parts. The world has yet to become what God intends it to be. The unity, the wholeness, the well-being and peace that God envisions for all of this, it hasn't yet happened. Reality still isn't one, mostly because of what we humans have done to divide it up. Reality isn't won yet, but everything belongs. Every created thing. God loves it all. And God is calling us, wooing us, to put an and between all of it, between all our binaries, until it's no longer a bunch of parts, but one whole. Psalm 85 this morning, it gives us the vision for how this works, what it looks like. The psalmist says, "Let me hear what the Lord God says, because he speaks peace to his faithful ones. Don't let them return to foolish ways." God's salvation is very close to those who honor him, so that his glory can live in our land. And my favorite part, faithful love and truth have met. Righteousness and peace have kissed. Truth springs up from the ground. Righteousness gazes down from heaven. This is a post-exilic psalm. The people have just returned home after about 7 decades in exile. They were forced into exile because they had torn their world apart. They had divided up their reality, refusing to honor and live for the whole. And so they trampled the widow and the orphan, the poor, the sick, and the old. They took bribes and told lies for their own self-gain, neglecting the whole, until one day their world was so divided up, so fractured, that it finally collapsed. And the people were carried off to Babylon. But Psalm 85 comes after all that. It's a prayer about a new vision for their future as a nation. They're home now, but they must start all over again. And so they sing their song about how they will create peace or shalom, how their reality will be one now. It will happen, they sing, when their own acts of tender mercy and their religious creeds become one. It will happen when their love and truth meet in the street, when their way of living and God's ways of peace embrace. That's when their faithfulness, their integrity will spring up from the ground, and the righteousness of God's heart will gaze down and meet them from heaven. And reality will be one. It's what we often today call heaven on earth. And the psalmist says it can't happen if our truth is without mercy, if our creeds are without deeds, if our prayers are without peacemaking. The all-important and must unite them. Because God is all about the and. It's the most important word in the divine lexicon. Because without the and, there can be no whole. Without the and, not everything can belong. This is also the message in the passage that we have from the book of Acts today. The book of Acts spans 3 decades following the crucifixion of Jesus. In Acts, the disciples of Jesus become apostles or envoys of Jesus' message. Peter, James, eventually Paul, they spread Jesus' teaching mostly to Jewish communities. Christianity at the time hadn't yet become a religion. It was simply a renewal movement within Judaism at the time. It focused on the message of Jesus, especially justice and grace. But in the 10th chapter of Acts, the Apostle Peter meets this official named Cornelius. He's a high-ranking official in the Italian army. Cornelius is a non-Jew, but we are told in the text that he's a God-fearer. In the first century, the term God-fear, it just simply described non-Jews who appreciated the teachings of Judaism. God-fearers at the time were Gentiles who often attended local synagogues throughout the empire. And Cornelius is a God-fearer. And he invites Peter to his home to share with his household the teachings of Jesus. And that's when everything changes for Peter. It's actually the decisive moment in history when the whole Christian movement changed forever. Sitting in the house of a non-Jew, a Gentile, a military officer no less, Peter is looking at all these beautiful, God-fearing people around the table. And the light goes off. And he says the most amazing thing. I now understand. God shows no partiality. Peter sees Cornelius' sincerity, his faith, and suddenly understands what Jesus had been talking about all along, that everyone belongs, that the family of God is big enough for everyone, even non-Jews. Cornelius and Peter couldn't be more different religiously, ethnically, socially, politically. But Peter remembers how Jesus used to deal with difference by healing a Roman centurion's daughter, or showing compassion for a Syrophoenician woman, or hanging out with Samaritans, lepers, prostitutes, tax collectors. Peter now sees what Jesus had always been trying to teach him in the first place. That God's love is for the Jews and the Gentiles, for the Hebrews and the Greeks, for the Judean and the Italian. It's all about the and, that one decisive conjunction that defines the loving purposes of God. In the ancient world, gods were associated with tribes and territories. Gods were meant to maintain physical boundaries, cultural borders, tribal identities, but here, Peter declares that God's love is impartial and inclusive. All the binaries, all the categories, all the either thises or that's that define and divide our world, they are human creations, not God's. God is always trying to unify what humans are so busy separating. God is always calling us to drop an and between every good thing that God has already blessed until all the parts become the whole. This is the way of God's wisdom, for us to come to see how it all belongs. A colleague told me a story many years ago about hiking in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California with his wife and some friends who knew the area well. They hiked to what was called the sewing machine tree. As the story goes, a long time ago, perhaps now more than 100 years ago, a homestead in that area burned down. And either during or soon after the fire, someone had pulled a sewing machine out of the house and put it in the fork of a young oak tree. And then, reasons now forgotten, nobody came back to retrieve the sewing machine. Over the years, that tree continued to grow with the sewing machine still resting in the fork of its trunk. That machine was made of iron and steel, materials much harder than the wood of the tree. So each year, the tree grew another ring. And each new ring that came into contact with a different part of the sewing machine adjusted itself to the shape of the machine. Over the years, ring by ring, the tree grew larger until the sewing machine became mostly engulfed by that tree. When my friend first discovered that tree in the Santa Cruz Mountains, he said only one side of the sewing machine was still visible, protruding from the tree. If that tree kept growing, by now it would have been completely incorporated into the wood. Someday it will happen. All the parts will find their place in the whole, and every good thing that God has already blessed will finally become one. Our takeaways for today: there is a hidden wholeness behind the visible world. What humans seek to split apart, God longs to join together. The work of every Christian is to drop a divine "and" between all that God has blessed until everything finally belongs.